The voting chamber fell silent as Ambassador Rhine placed his three-fingered hand against the confirmation panel. Around him, representatives from 43 different species did the same. The holographic display turned green. After 847 years, the quarantine was lifted. Rhine allowed himself a small smile. His people needed this. The Valorian population had grown beyond their capacity to feed everyone. They needed new worlds, new resources, new hope. And here sat 200 perfectly preserved star systems, empty and waiting. The humans were gone. Everyone knew it. 8 centuries of silence proved it better than any investigation could. "The motion passes," announced the council arbiter, a floating crystalline entity that predated most species in the chamber. "Human territories are hereby released from protected status and opened for settlement claims." Cheers erupted from the younger species. The Valorians were not alone in their desperation. Dozens of civilizations saw opportunity in those abandoned worlds, but Rhine had moved quickly. His colonization fleet was already positioned at the border, waiting for exactly this moment. As the chamber emptied, Rhine noticed something odd. The elder species, those whose civilizations stretched back thousands of years, had not voted. They sat in their designated spaces, completely still. The Methuan collective, ancient beyond measure. The founders, who claimed to have seeded life across the galaxy. The silent ones, who rarely spoke but always listened. None of them had raised objection, but none had supported the motion either. Rhine approached the nearest elder representative, a Methuan whose crystalline body pulsed with slow, steady light. "Your people abstained from the vote." "Yes," the Methuan replied, its voice like wind through stone. "May I ask why?" "You may ask anything. We choose what to answer." Rhine felt frustration building but kept his tone respectful. The elder species commanded respect, even if they often spoke in riddles. "Do you object to our settlement of human space?" The Methuan was quiet for a long moment. Lights within its body shifted from blue to deep purple. "We remember them. You do not." "I know the history. Humans expanded rapidly, claimed many worlds, then vanished without explanation. Their automated systems still function, but no living human has been seen in over 800 years." "You know facts. That is not the same as remembering." "Then tell me what you remember." The Methuan turned its entire body to face Rhine directly. "We remember fear." Before Rhine could respond, the ancient being floated away, leaving him alone in the emptying chamber. He pushed the cryptic warning from his mind. The elder species were always like this, speaking in mysteries, clinging to outdated concerns. The galaxy had moved forward. New civilizations had risen. The balance of power had shifted. Whatever the humans had been, they were gone now. The evidence was overwhelming. Every attempt to make contact had failed. Every probe sent into human space returned the same data: functioning cities, active power grids, self-maintaining infrastructure, but no inhabitants. It was as if the entire species had simply walked away from everything they had built. Rhine made his way to the communications hub and sent the signal his fleet had been waiting for. Within minutes, he received confirmation. 300 colony ships were already entering human space, headed for the closest habitable world. The records called it New Bristol. His people would call it New Valoria. The journey took 18 days. Rhine traveled aboard the lead vessel, reviewing everything known about their destination. New Bristol had been one of humanity's earliest colony worlds. Population records suggested it had housed nearly 15 million people at its peak. The planet itself was remarkably Earth-like, with comfortable temperatures, breathable atmosphere, and abundant water. When they entered orbit, Rhine stood at the observation deck and looked down at the world that would save his civilization. Cities sprawled across 3 continents, their lights still burning after centuries. Agricultural zones showed green on the scanners, crops growing in automated farms with no one to harvest them. It should have been eerie. Instead, it looked like paradise. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," his communications officer reported. "From whom?" "The planetary AI system. It's automated. The message repeats on all frequencies." Ryan nodded. "Play it." A calm, neutral voice filled the bridge. It spoke in perfectly clear galactic standard, the common language adopted by the Council centuries ago. "This territory is under quarantine protection. Settlement is prohibited by Galactic Council decree. Please withdraw immediately. This is your only warning." "Response?" asked his second officer. Ryan shook his head. "Ignore it. The quarantine has been lifted. The AI is operating on outdated protocols. Continue landing procedures." The first shuttles descended through the atmosphere without incident. Ryan watched through live feeds as his people stepped onto human soil for the first time. They walked through streets that had seen no footsteps in living memory. Buildings rose around them, perfectly maintained, waiting for occupants who would never return. Teams spread out across the city, documenting everything. Human technology was more advanced than current galactic standards in almost every category. Materials that never degraded, power systems that required no fuel, transportation networks that still moved empty vehicles on precise schedules, medical facilities with equipment that made modern hospitals look primitive. "This is incredible," breathed Ryan's chief scientist. "If we can reverse engineer even a fraction of this technology, the applications are limitless." Ryan agreed. The humans had left behind treasures beyond measure. Tools, knowledge, infrastructure that would take his people centuries to develop on their own. All of it sitting here, unused and unclaimed. Over the following days, more ships arrived. The settlement grew from hundreds to thousands. Valorians moved into human homes, activated human computers, began converting the cities to suit their needs. The planetary AI continued its warnings, but they became easier to ignore with each passing day. "Sir, the AI is becoming problematic," his chief technician reported on the fifth day. "It controls most of the infrastructure. We need full access to power generation, water treatment, and manufacturing facilities. The system keeps requesting authorization codes we don't have." "Can you bypass it?" "Yes, but it would require shutting down the core AI." Ryan considered this. The AI had maintained everything perfectly for 8 centuries. It was an impressive achievement, but it was also an obstacle to proper settlement. His people needed control of their new home. "Do it," he ordered. The technician worked for 3 hours, carefully isolating and deactivating the AI's primary functions. The voice that had warned them away finally went silent. Systems transferred to manual control. The Valorians now commanded everything. As the AI's last functions shut down, Ryan noticed a small alert on the technician's display. A single message packet, compressed and encrypted, had been sent the moment the shutdown sequence began. "What was that?" he asked. The technician checked his logs. "Automated distress beacon. It transmitted to coordinates in deep space, beyond charted territory." "Can you trace it?" "Already did. The signal traveled for approximately 3 seconds, then stopped. Whatever received it is far outside the known galaxy." Ryan felt a momentary unease remembering the Methuan's words. "We remember fear." But he pushed it aside. Probably just an old failsafe, reporting to a human facility that no longer existed. Nothing to worry about. "Log it and move on," he said. "We have a colony to build." Deep in the outer dark, beyond the mapped edges of civilized space, something stirred. The distress signal traveled through the void at faster-than-light speeds, crossing distances that would take conventional ships centuries to traverse. It reached its destination in moments. The structure that received the message defied easy description. It was not a ship, though it could move. It was not a station, though it remained stationary. Some called it a habitat. Others, a vault. The humans who built it had simply called it haven. Inside, in chambers that stretched for kilometers, lights began to activate in sequence. Rows upon rows of cryogenic pods hummed to life, their diagnostic systems running checks that had not been needed for 847 years. One by one, status indicators changed from blue to amber to green. In Pod 7749, Admiral Grace Okonkwo opened her eyes. The transition from cryosleep was not pleasant. It never had been. Her mind struggled to catch up with her body, memories flooding back in disjointed fragments. She remembered the decision, the vote, the long debate that had consumed humanity for nearly a decade. She remembered the sadness in the eyes of the council elders when humanity announced its choice. "We will leave." The pod opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Grace sat up slowly, her muscles protesting after centuries of inactivity. Medical nanites coursed through her system, repairing minor damage and bringing her body back to full function. Around her, thousands of other pods were opening. People emerged, confused and disoriented. "Status report," Grace said, her voice rough from disuse. A holographic interface materialized in front of her. Text scrolled past, updating her on everything that had happened while humanity slept. Most of it was routine. Haven's automated systems had performed flawlessly. Life support, power generation, structural integrity, all nominal. The fleet's other ships reported similar status. 50 vessels total, each carrying 1,000,000 souls in cryosleep. 50 million humans, the volunteers who chose exile over dominance. Then she saw the alert that had triggered the wake-up sequence. Perimeter breach, AI deactivation, unauthorized settlement of human territories. Grace felt a familiar weight settle onto her shoulders. Command, responsibility, the burden she had carried before the long sleep and would carry again now. She pulled up visual feeds from New Bristol. The images came from surveillance satellites that had orbited human worlds for centuries, watching and waiting. She saw Valorian settlers moving through human cities. She saw them in human homes, using human technology, claiming human worlds. For a moment she felt anger, then it passed. This was not the Valorians' fault. They did not understand. How could they? The truth had been buried deliberately, hidden to protect both humans and everyone else. "Wake the council," she ordered. "Full briefing in 2 hours. Begin system checks on all vessels. I want readiness reports within the day." Around her, humanity's command structure reassembled itself. Officers found their posts. Technicians activated long-dormant systems. The fleet, which had drifted silently for 8 centuries, began to wake. Grace made her way to the observation deck, wanting to see with her own eyes the vast emptiness they had called home. Haven floated in a region of space so remote that stars appeared only as distant points of light. They had chosen this isolation deliberately, far enough that no one would stumble across them by accident, far enough that they could not easily return, even if they wanted to. She pulled up the historical records, reviewing the events that led to this moment. The memories were her own, but seeing them documented felt different, more real, more permanent. Humanity had reached the stars with enthusiasm and hope. They made friends easily, learned quickly, adapted to whatever challenges arose. But they also won conflicts with disturbing efficiency. Every dispute that turned violent ended in human victory. Not because humans had better weapons, though they often did. Not because they were physically superior, though they often were. They won because they were better at war than anyone else. At first, this was seen as a positive trait. The galaxy had its share of aggressive species, and humanity proved effective at deterring them. But victories accumulated. Patterns emerged. Other species began to notice something troubling. Humans did not just win wars. They dominated them. They adapted to any tactic, countered any strategy, and overcame any obstacle with relentless efficiency. Fear grew, not the fear of human aggression, but fear of human capability. What would happen if humanity ever decided to conquer rather than cooperate? What would happen if this species, so friendly and helpful, ever turn that talent for warfare toward expansion? The answer was obvious to everyone. Humanity would win. They would win overwhelmingly, and there would be nothing anyone could do to stop them. The galactic community never said this directly. They were too polite, too diplomatic, but humanity understood. Grace had been part of the debates that consumed Earth and its colonies. Some argued they should stay and prove their peaceful intentions. Others suggested they limit their military capabilities voluntarily, but the majority reached a different conclusion. If we stay, they will always fear us, and that fear will eventually turn to aggression. They will strike first, believing it their only chance for survival. Even if we defend ourselves, even if we show mercy, we will prove them right. We will demonstrate our superiority, and the fear will only grow stronger. The solution was radical. Humanity would leave, not in defeat or surrender, but as a gift. They would remove themselves from the equation entirely, allowing other species to develop without the shadow of human military prowess hanging over them. Some called it cowardice. Grace understood the criticism, but she also understood the alternative. Humanity could have stayed, they could have dominated, it would have been easy, and that was exactly why they chose to go. The council meeting began precisely on schedule. Grace found herself surrounded by people she had known for decades, though they looked exactly as they had when entering cryosleep. No one had aged. Time had stopped for them while the galaxy moved forward. "Options?" she asked, keeping the discussion focused. Admiral David Reeves spoke first. "We could ignore it. The Valorians are settling one world. Let them have it. We still control 199 other systems." "And when they settle those two," Grace countered. "When others follow their example, our absence was meant to be temporary quarantine protection. If that protection has been removed, more will come." Commander Lisa Washington suggested a different approach. "We could send a diplomatic message, explain the situation, request they withdraw peacefully." "They don't know who we are," Grace said. "To them, we're a ghost story, extinct or mythical. Our words will carry no weight." Silence fell across the room. Everyone understood the implication. Words alone would not be enough, but action meant revealing themselves. It meant returning to the very situation they had fled. Grace made the decision that command required. "We go back, not to conquer or punish, to remind them why the quarantine existed in the first place. We show them what we are, why we left, and why they should respect our choice to remain apart." The vote was unanimous. Within hours, the fleet began its journey. 50 massive vessels, each carrying 1,000,000 sleeping souls, turned toward home. The journey would take 8 months at maximum sustainable speed, time enough to prepare, time enough to hope that violence would not be necessary. As Haven's engines powered up for the first time in centuries, Grace stood at the observation deck and watched the stars begin to shift. She had hoped never to see the core systems again, but duty called as it always had. Humanity was not vengeful. They were not conquerors, but they were capable, and that capability came with responsibility. 3 months after the first settlement, New Bristol thrived with Valorian life. The population had grown to nearly 200,000. More ships arrived weekly, bringing families eager to start fresh on a world that offered everything they needed. The human cities had been adapted quickly. Valorian signage replaced human text. Public spaces were redesigned to accommodate different physiology. What had been human was becoming Valorian. Ambassador Rhine walked through what his people now called Central District, observing the transformation with satisfaction. Children played in parks that human children had once enjoyed. Markets bustled with vendors selling Valorian foods and goods. This was what he had fought for, a future for his people, built on the foundations the humans had mysteriously abandoned. His communicator chimed. "Sir, we have a situation at the Northern Research Facility." Rhine changed direction, heading for the transport station. "What kind of situation?" The team investigating human military installations triggered something. They say you need to see it yourself. The facility was located in the mountains, a massive underground complex that had remained sealed until yesterday. Valorian engineers had spent weeks cutting through security doors that resisted every conventional method. When they finally breached the outer layers, they found something unexpected. Weapons, thousands of them, but not the kind Ryan had anticipated. These were not guns or missiles or energy projectors. They were systems, platforms, technologies that defied immediate understanding. "We ran diagnostics," explained Dr. Venn, the lead researcher. She was a specialist in xenotechnology, brought specifically to study human artifacts. "These are defense systems, but they operate on principles we've never encountered. Look at this one." She gestured to a sleek metallic device roughly the size of a Valorian transport. "We think it's a shield generator, but it doesn't use energy the way our shields do. It manipulates probability. It makes attacks statistically unlikely to succeed." Ryan stared at the device. "That's not possible." "That's what I said. But the math checks out. The humans figured out how to weaponize quantum mechanics at a macro scale, and this is just one example. Over here, we have what appears to be a communications disruption system that doesn't jam signals. It makes people forget they wanted to communicate in the first place. Psychological warfare through technology." She led him deeper into the facility. Each chamber revealed new wonders and new horrors. Weapons that did not kill but instead convinced enemies they were already dead. Armor that made the wearer appear to be in multiple locations simultaneously. Defensive turrets that analyzed attack patterns and developed countermeasures in real time. "None of this has been activated," Dr. Venn continued. "Everything is in standby mode. But sir, if these systems were operational, nothing in the current galaxy could stand against them. The humans were 800 years ahead of us, maybe more." Ryan felt the first stirring of unease. Why would they build all this and then leave? "That's what worries me. Maybe they didn't leave by choice. Maybe something forced them out, something even their technology couldn't fight." Before Ryan could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Emergency lighting activated, bathing everything in red. His communicator exploded with incoming messages. "Sir, you need to return to the capital immediately." "What's happening?" Long-range sensors detected something at the edge of the system. Multiple massive objects entering real space. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. Ryan ran for the transport. By the time he reached the capital, the situation had escalated beyond his worst fears. Every screen in the city displayed the same image. 50 enormous vessels arranged in perfect formation at the system's edge. Ships that made Valorian cruisers look like children's toys. The broadcast was simple. 4 words in Galactic Standard repeated on every frequency. "You have 10 hours." The Galactic Council convened in emergency session. Ryan found himself standing before the same chamber where he had celebrated his victory months ago. But this time, the atmosphere was very different. The elder species were no longer silent. They spoke with the weight of ages. "We warned you," the Methuan representative said. Its crystalline body pulsed with dark red light, a color Ryan had never seen before. "We remembered. You did not listen." "Who are they?" Ryan demanded. "Where did they come from?" "They are human," answered one of the founders, a being so ancient that it rarely bothered with speech. "They never left. They removed themselves from the equation, hoping their absence would allow the rest of us to grow without fear. You have violated that agreement." "What agreement? There was no agreement. They disappeared. They abandoned their worlds." "They removed themselves," the founder corrected. "There is a difference. They chose exile over dominance. They chose to protect us from themselves, and now you have forced them to return." Ryan felt ice forming in his chest. "Are they going to attack?" "That depends on you. The humans do not want war. They never did. That was the entire point, but they will not allow their choice to be disrespected. The 10 hours passed in growing panic. Rhine ordered his military to prepare defenses, but his generals were honest with him. Against ships that size, with technology that advanced, they had no chance. The best they could hope for was to buy time for civilians to evacuate. But evacuate to where? The human ships blocked every exit from the system. As the deadline approached, Rhine received a direct communication. No intermediary, no diplomatic channels, just a simple audio connection to the lead human vessel. Ambassador Rhine, a calm female voice said, "My name is Admiral Grace Okonkwo. We need to talk." Rhine's hands shook as he accepted the connection. "Admiral, I assume you're here to reclaim your territory." "No, we're here to explain why we left it." Grace's image appeared on his screen. She looked human, as the old records had described. But there was something in her eyes that made Rhine understand the Methuan's words. This was someone who had seen things, done things, won things that she wished she had not. "We left because we were too good at winning," Grace said simply. "Every time someone challenged us, we won. Every time someone attacked us, we defeated them. Not just victory, dominance. We adapted to any threat, overcame any obstacle, and did it with an efficiency that terrified everyone, including ourselves." "Then why not conquer? Why not rule?" "Because we're human. We don't want to rule, we want to cooperate. We want to be part of a galactic community, not its masters. But our very existence prevented that. As long as we remained, everyone else lived in fear. Fear of what we might become. Fear of what we could do if we chose to." Grace leaned forward, her expression intense. "So we made a choice. We removed ourselves. We went far enough away that we could not easily return. We left our worlds intact, maintained by automated systems as a reminder, a temple to what we chose to walk away from. And we asked the Council to protect those worlds, not for our sake, but for everyone else's, to prevent exactly what you have done." The Council lifted the quarantine. No, the younger members voted to lift it. The elder species, those who remembered us, abstained. They knew better. They tried to warn you through silence. You did not listen. Rhine found his voice. "What happens now?" "That depends on your choice. We don't want to fight. We don't want to demonstrate what 8 centuries of advancement in military technology looks like. We just want you to leave. All of you. Every settler, every ship, every claim on human space. You have 30 days. And if we refuse?" Grace's expression did not change, but something in her eyes made Rhine's blood run cold. "Then we will show you exactly why we left. Not as a threat. As an education. You will understand completely and permanently why the galaxy is safer with us absent." The Valorian government faced an impossible decision. Rhine stood before the High Assembly, a gathering of his species' most powerful leaders, and watched them argue. Some demanded they fight. Others insisted they negotiate. A few suggested immediate withdrawal, but the majority seemed paralyzed by indecision. "We cannot simply abandon 200,000 colonists," argued General Kress, the military commander. "Our people have built lives there. They have homes, businesses, families. You want us to tell them it was all for nothing?" "Better that than extinction," countered Representative Doria. "Did you see those ships? Did you listen to what the Admiral said? The humans left because they were too dangerous to remain. If we force them to prove that point, we all lose." Rhine spoke carefully. "I have reviewed the historical records. Before they disappeared, humans participated in 47 armed conflicts. They won all 47, not just victory, complete dominance. And that was 800 years ago, with technology we barely understand today. Imagine what they've developed in the centuries since." "Speculation," Kress shot back. "We've seen their abandoned facilities. Yes, their technology is advanced, but it's old, untested. How do we know those ships even have functional weapons? This could be an elaborate bluff." A new voice entered the conversation. Elder Prime, the oldest living Valorian, rarely spoke in assembly, but when he did, everyone listened. I was young when the humans vanished, just entering government service. I remember the discussions in the council chambers. The elder species were terrified, not of human aggression but of human potential. He paused, his aged features grave. There was a war, the Kresh Dominion. You would not know them. They were powerful, expansionist, violent. They attacked a human colony world without warning, killed millions. They expected retaliation. They got annihilation, not of their people, but of their will to fight. The humans developed psychological warfare techniques that broke the Kresh psychologically. They surrendered within a week, and their entire civilization collapsed into civil war within a month. The humans did not fire a single shot at the Kresh homeworld. Silence filled the chamber. That, Elder Prime continued, is why they left. Not because they lost, but because winning was too easy. Because they could destroy civilizations without violence, and that frightened them more than it frightened us. The assembly voted. It was not unanimous, but the majority chose withdrawal. They would honor the human deadline, but the decision came with conditions. 30 days was not enough time for a complete evacuation. They would need at least 60 days. Rhine was authorized to negotiate an extension. Grace agreed to a meeting, not aboard her ship but on neutral ground. She suggested Outpost 7, a small council facility at the edge of human space. Rhine arrived with a small delegation, expecting a similar group from the humans. He found Grace alone. She sat in the observation lounge looking out at the stars. When Rhine entered, she gestured to the seat across from her. No guards, no weapons, no display of force, just a conversation between two people trying to find a solution. 60 days, Rhine said without preamble. We need more time. 200,000 people, all their possessions, the infrastructure they've built. 30 days is impossible. Grace nodded slowly. I understand, and I want to grant your request, but there's a problem. She pulled up a holographic display. It showed human space, marked in blue. Surrounding it in various colors were claims filed by dozens of different species. The Valorians were not alone. 13 other civilizations had filed settlement intentions with the Council. Some had already sent survey teams. Others were preparing colonization fleets. If I give you 60 days, I have to give everyone 60 days. And some of these species are not as reasonable as yours. The Kresh remnant, for example. They see human space as compensation for what humans did to their ancestors. They're not interested in negotiation. Rhine studied the map. What do you want? For everyone to leave. For the quarantine to be reinstated with teeth this time. For the galaxy to remember why we left and respect that choice. And if they don't? Grace was quiet for a long moment. Then we'll have to remind them, and I really don't want to do that. Rhine saw something in her expression that surprised him. Sadness. This was not a warrior eager for battle. This was someone who had walked away from power because she understood its cost. Why did you come alone? He asked. Because you're not my enemy. You're just someone who made a mistake. I don't need guards or weapons for this conversation. I need you to understand what's at stake. She changed the display, pulling up archived footage from the conflicts Elder Prime had mentioned. Rhine watched as human forces dismantled aggressive civilizations with surgical precision. He saw battles won through psychology rather than firepower. He saw enemies surrender not because they lost, but because they realized continuing was pointless. We're good at war, Grace said quietly. Too good. We can analyze your tactics, predict your strategies, and counter them before you even deploy. We can make your own people doubt you. We can turn your strengths into weaknesses. And we can do all of this while taking minimal casualties on both sides. That's what makes us dangerous. Not that we kill efficiently, but that we win without killing at all. She closed the display and met his eyes. That's why we left. because the galaxy deserves to develop on its own terms, without us hanging over everyone like a sword waiting to fall. But we can't allow our choice to be erased. If we let you settle our worlds, if we let others claim what we abandoned, then we become irrelevant. And if we're irrelevant, there's no reason to stay away. Rhine understood. The humans had not fled in fear, they had left in mercy, but mercy required respect. Without it, the gesture was meaningless. "I'll speak to the assembly," he said, "but I can't control what other species do." "I know, that's my problem to solve." Over the next week, the situation deteriorated. The Kresh remnant sent a battle fleet to New Bristol, refusing council orders to withdraw. They claimed ancestral right to human territories, arguing that the humans had destroyed their civilization and owed them compensation. 3 other species followed suit, though with less aggressive posturing. Grace sent warnings to all of them. The Kresh ignored her completely. The others hesitated but did not retreat. Rhine watched from the Valorian evacuation fleet as the situation reached critical mass. His people were leaving, loading transports as quickly as possible, but the Kresh were arriving, bringing warships and troop carriers. They intended to take New Bristol by force if necessary. The human fleet moved into position. 50 massive vessels surrounded the planet, creating a blockade that nothing could penetrate. The Kresh commander, a warrior named Dresh who had built his reputation on aggressive tactics, sent a simple message to Grace: "Move or be moved." Grace's response was equally simple: "No." The galaxy held its breath. Rhine and everyone else watched as 2 forces faced each other across the void. The Kresh had numbers: 200 warships, all heavily armed, all ready for battle. The humans had technology and experience. 50 vessels against 200. On paper, the Kresh had the advantage. But everyone who understood history knew better. Numbers did not matter when facing humans. What mattered was will. And the Kresh were about to learn what it meant when human will hardened into action. Commander Dresh had earned his position through violence. In Kresh culture, strength was the only currency that mattered. He had killed 17 challengers to reach his rank. He had conquered 6 systems through military force. He did not believe in negotiation or compromise. The humans had destroyed his ancestors' empire. He would claim their worlds as payment. His tactical officer provided the assessment. "Sir, the human vessels are maintaining defensive positions. No weapons charged, no shields at maximum. They're not preparing to fight." Dresh smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "They're bluffing. Move the fleet forward. If they don't retreat, we engage." The Kresh armada advanced. 200 warships, each bristling with weapons, each crewed by warriors eager to prove themselves. They crossed the boundary that Grace had established, entering the space directly around New Bristol. Nothing happened. "Sir, the humans are hailing us." "Ignore it, continue advance." The fleet moved closer. Still, the human ships did not react. They simply floated in space, silent and waiting. Dresh felt his confidence grow. This was exactly what he had expected. The humans were a dead civilization, clinging to past glory with outdated technology. They would not fight because they could not fight. "All ships arm weapons. Prepare to fire on my command." Energy readings spiked across his fleet. Weapons systems charged. Targeting solutions locked onto the nearest human vessels. Dresh gave the order he had been waiting to give. "Fire!" 200 warships unleashed their full arsenals simultaneously. Missiles, energy beams, kinetic projectiles, everything they had. The display lit up with weapons fire, enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. All of it converged on the human ships. And vanished. Not deflected, not absorbed, simply ceased to exist. Every missile, every beam, every projectile that should have struck the human vessels simply disappeared the moment it came within range, as if it had never been fired at all. Dresh stared at his tactical display in disbelief. What just happened? Unknown, sir. Our weapons are functioning correctly. The targeting was accurate, but nothing reached the targets. Energy readings suggest the humans have some kind of probability manipulation field. They're making it statistically impossible for attacks to succeed. Before Dresh could respond, the human ships finally acted, but not with weapons, with communication. Grace's voice filled every Kresh ship simultaneously. You fired first. Remember that. What happens next is your choice, not mine. All ships continue firing, Dresh roared. Overwhelm their defenses. The Kresh fleet unleashed everything they had. Wave after wave of weapons fire poured toward the human vessels. None of it mattered. The probability fields, or whatever technology the humans employed, rendered every attack meaningless. It was like trying to hit a target that existed in multiple quantum states simultaneously. The weapons could not decide which version to strike, so they struck nothing. Then the humans demonstrated what 800 years of advancement looked like. The 50 human vessels moved in perfect synchronization. No visible weapons activated. No apparent attacks launched. But across the Kresh fleet, ships began experiencing cascading system failures. Not damage, not destruction, just failure. Engines stopped responding. Weapons refused to fire. Life support continued functioning, keeping everyone alive, but every military system simply shut down. Dresh watched in horror as his flagship's controls went dark. Around him, his crew frantically tried to restore function. Nothing worked. The systems were not damaged. They simply would not respond, as if they had decided, collectively, that they would rather not participate in this battle. Sir, we're receiving data packets from the human fleet. What kind of data? Tactical analysis. They're showing us every mistake we made, every weakness in our formation, every vulnerability in our systems. They're demonstrating how they could have destroyed us if they wanted to. The display activated without authorization, showing Dresh what the humans wanted him to see. Detailed breakdowns of his fleet's capabilities. Simulations showing 100 different ways the engagement could have ended in total Kresh annihilation. Each simulation was precise, calculated, and completely plausible. Version 1 showed the humans using directed electromagnetic pulses to fry every electronic system simultaneously, leaving the Kresh fleet dead in space. Version 2 demonstrated kinetic impactors targeting engine cores specifically, crippling the fleet without casualties but making the ships useless. Version 3 was psychological. The humans broadcast information about each ship's structural weaknesses directly to its crew, making them understand exactly how vulnerable they were. Version 4 through 100 continued in similar fashion, each one showing a different method of victory, each one carefully designed to minimize casualties while ensuring complete dominance. Grace's voice returned. I could show you 10,000 more scenarios. Every single one ends with your defeat, not because we want to destroy you, but because we're very, very good at finding ways to win without killing. That's what makes us dangerous. We don't need to murder you. We just need to make you irrelevant. Dresh felt something he had never experienced before. Not fear, not exactly. It was the realization of absolute tactical inferiority, the understanding that nothing he could do would matter. The humans had not just countered his attack, they had rendered it meaningless, and they had done so while keeping everyone alive. You have two choices, Grace continued. Accept defeat, withdraw your fleet, and leave human space permanently, or continue fighting and force us to demonstrate every single one of those scenarios in practical application. We will not kill you. We will simply prove beyond any doubt that opposing us is pointless. Dresh looked around his bridge. His crew, warriors all, looked back at him with expressions he had never seen on Kresh faces. Not fear, not anger, understanding. The kind of understanding that comes when superior force makes further resistance irrational. He opened a channel to the human flagship. Admiral Okonkwo, I am Commander Dresh of the Kresh Remnant Fleet. We withdraw. Thank you, Commander. I take no pleasure in this, but I need you to understand something. This is why we left. This is what we're capable of. And this is why the galaxy is safer with us absent. Tell your people. Tell everyone. The quarantine exists to protect you from us. The Kresh fleet retreated. System by system, their engines came back online under human control. Grace granted them enough power to leave, nothing more. They limped away, defeated without a single casualty, humiliated without ever being struck. Rhine watched from the Valorian evacuation fleet. The entire engagement had lasted 17 minutes. The humans had demonstrated complete tactical superiority without firing a shot. Every species with claims on human territory suddenly reconsidered their positions. Within a day, the Council received withdrawal notices from all 13 species. Within a week, human space was empty except for the human fleet and the last few Valorian transports finishing evacuation. Grace sent a final message to the Council, broadcast publicly so everyone could hear. We're leaving again. We'll return to the Outer Dark and resume our exile. The quarantine is now voluntary, but we ask that you enforce it. Not with laws or force, but with memory. Remember what happened here. Remember what we could do. Remember why we chose to leave. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of centuries. We're not monsters. We're not conquerors. We're just people who happen to be exceptionally good at war, and we hate that about ourselves. So we remove ourselves from temptation. We ask you to respect that choice, not for our sake, but for everyone's. The broadcast ended. The human fleet began moving back toward the edge of known space. Rhine stood at the observation window of his transport, watching them go. Massive vessels disappearing into the dark, carrying 50 million souls who chose peace through absence. Elder Prime stood beside him. Now you understand. Rhine nodded slowly. They could rule us all easily. Yes, and that's exactly why they won't. 2 years passed before the Galactic Council formally addressed what had happened. They gathered in the Grand Chamber representatives from every major civilization to discuss the human question, not whether humans existed. Everyone knew they did now, but what to do about them. The Methuan Collective proposed a solution. We established the exclusion principle. Human space becomes forbidden territory, not by law but by cultural agreement. We teach our children why. We preserve the memory. We ensure that what happened is never forgotten. The motion passed unanimously. For the first time in Council history, every single member voted the same way. The elder species because they remembered, the younger species because they had learned. Rhine attended as a witness, no longer an ambassador. His government had collapsed after the New Bristol incident. New leadership had taken over, people who understood the mistake that had been made. But Rhine had requested to speak, and the Council had granted permission. I made a choice based on incomplete information, he said, standing before thousands of representatives. I saw abandoned worlds and assumed they were free for taking. I did not understand that the abandonment was deliberate, that it was a gift. He pulled up images of New Bristol, now empty again. The city still functioned. The lights still burned. The farms still grew food, but no one lived there. Human automated systems had resumed their eternal maintenance, waiting for occupants who would never return. The humans left us a warning, Rhine continued. Not a threat, a demonstration of what they chose to walk away from. They showed us power and then showed us restraint. They proved they could dominate and then proved they would not. I believe we should honor that. The Council agreed. They established monitoring systems around human space, not to keep humans in, but to keep everyone else out. They created educational programs, teaching young species about the humans who chose exile over empire. They made sure the lesson would survive through generations. But Rhine wanted more. He spent the next decade researching human history, reading everything the Council archives contained. He learned about Earth, the small blue planet where humanity began. He learned about their early space exploration, their first colonies, their initial contact with alien life. He learned about their wars and their peace, their failures and their triumphs. And he learned about their internal debates, the conversations they had among themselves before choosing exile. Those records had been sealed, but the Council granted him access. He read thousands of documents, watched hundreds of recorded discussions, absorbed perspectives from every faction of human society. Some humans had wanted to stay and prove they could be peaceful. Others argued for self-limitation, restricting their military capabilities voluntarily. But the majority reached a different conclusion. The problem was not what they did. The problem was what they could do. As long as they remained, other species would live in fear of human potential, and that fear would eventually poison everything. One document struck Ryan particularly hard. It was a speech given by a human philosopher named Dr. Sarah Martinez, delivered to the United Earth Assembly during the final debates. "We're being asked to choose between our home and our conscience," she had said. "To choose between what we want and what's right. Some call this surrender. I call it evolution. True strength is not the ability to dominate. True strength is the wisdom to step back when your presence causes harm, even unintentional harm." She had paused and the recording showed her wiping tears from her eyes. "I don't want to leave. Earth is beautiful, our colonies are thriving, we've built something wonderful here, but I've seen the fear in alien eyes when they look at us. I've heard the whispers in council chambers, they're afraid of what we might become. And the terrible truth is they're right to be afraid, not because we're evil but because we're capable, so I vote yes. We leave. We take our capability far away where it can't threaten anyone. And we hope that someday, the galaxy will be ready for us to return." Ryan closed the file and sat in silence for a long time. The humans had not been driven away. They had chosen to go. They had looked at themselves honestly, recognized their own danger, and made the hardest choice imaginable. They had given up everything to spare others. That realization changed him. He spent the rest of his life working to preserve human memory in Valorian culture. He wrote books, gave lectures, established museums. He made sure his people would never forget what the humans had taught them. Power without wisdom is tyranny. Capability without restraint is catastrophe. True strength is choosing not to use it. Meanwhile, in the outer dark, Grace Okonkwo stood at Haven's observation deck and watched her people return to cryosleep. The crisis had passed. They could resume their exile. Most went willingly, understanding the necessity, but some asked questions. "Will we ever go home?" asked a young woman named Dr. Patricia Owens, one of the scientists who helped maintain the fleet. Grace considered her answer carefully. "I don't know. Maybe someday the galaxy will be ready for us. Maybe they'll develop their own capabilities and won't fear ours anymore. Maybe they'll invite us back as equals rather than potential conquerors. But until then, we wait. It doesn't seem fair. We didn't do anything wrong." "No," Grace agreed. "We didn't, but fairness isn't the point. We're not being punished. We're being responsible. The galaxy deserves a chance to grow without us casting a shadow over everything. That's worth waiting for." Patricia nodded slowly, though Grace could see she was not entirely convinced. The young woman entered her cryopod and Grace initiated the sleep sequence. One by one, humanity returned to hibernation. 50 million people choosing dreams over dominance. Grace was the last to enter cryosleep, as she had been the first to wake. Before closing her pod, she recorded a message. It would be stored in Haven's primary systems, waiting to be broadcast if humanity ever needed to return again. "To whoever receives this message, we are human. We left because we were too dangerous to remain. We return only when forced, only when our absence is violated. We do not want to fight. We do not want to conquer. We want peace. But we will enforce our exile if necessary. not with cruelty, not with violence, but with the undeniable demonstration of capability. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. We are not gods, we are not monsters, we are people who made a choice. We chose to protect others from ourselves. We ask that you respect that choice, not through fear but through understanding. We left a temple behind us, not to worship but to remember. The temple contains everything we walked away from. Power, territory, the potential for empire. We gave it all up. Please do not make us prove why. The message ended. Grace entered her pod and closed her eyes. The cryosleep systems activated, lowering her body temperature and slowing her metabolism. Within minutes, she joined the rest of humanity in dreamless sleep. Haven systems returned to maintenance mode. The fleet drifted in the vast emptiness of the outer dark, far from any star, far from any civilization. Silent guardians of a choice that transcended individual desire. In the council chambers, 50 years after the New Bristol incident, a new generation of representatives gathered. They discussed trade agreements, territorial disputes, technological sharing, normal galactic politics. But whenever debates grew heated, whenever conflicts seemed inevitable, someone would invoke the exclusion principle. Remember the humans, they would say. Remember what they chose. Remember what they gave up. If they could walk away from power, we can walk away from pride. It became a cultural touchstone, a reminder that strength and wisdom were not the same thing, that capability and responsibility must walk together, that sometimes the hardest choice was also the right choice. And in the darkness beyond known space, 50 million humans slept. Not dead, not gone, just waiting, patient guardians of a future where they might return not as conquerors or gods but as friends, as equals, as people who had learned the hardest lesson of all. Power means nothing without the wisdom to set it aside.